Tanya, and where are you now? In Hamburg or in?
No, I'm not in Hamburg. I'm teaching in Alessandria in Italy.
In Italy?
Yeah, yeah.
In what city?
It's Alessandria. It's
Alessandria.
yes.
Alessandria, it's near Milan or?
It's it's a triangle of Milan, Torino, and Alessandria.
Okay,
Umberto
yeah.
Eco was born here.
Yeah, I've never been there, but yeah, I have a friend who bought an apartment in Alessandria when he
So
uh, sold his apartment in Moscow, Arseniy.
good.
Yeah.
This
So
is
you
now
suggest me to do that?
we let all people in. So good afternoon to everybody. My name is Sanja Bojanic, and you already know me. And I'm very happy to have Ilya Kalinin today with us. And we were just chatting about geopolitical coordination of spaces and academics. And I know for you as well, you're all working hard. And Ilya, I'm very happy on behalf of the center to host you. Today, we will record our session. You already agreed on that?
Yes,
Perfect.
yes, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I do.
So I will not take much of your time, and we will go straight to the point.
Okay, so I guess it's now my turn to introduce
Sami,
Ilya
your turn to present Ilya, and then the talk. Thank you.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone, and I'm Arseniy Kumankov. We probably met in December on this short Zoom meeting we had, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in a month in real life. But today I'm happy to introduce Ilya Kalinin, who is currently a visiting scholar at Humboldt University in Berlin, and also he's teaching at Bard College Berlin, but previously he worked at St. Petersburg State University and Higher School of Economics in St. Petersburg, so both are big Russian universities. Formally speaking, Dr. Kalinin is a specialist in literature studies and Russian literature more specifically. And this is true indeed. He's a great scholar and a big specialist, and there is a long list of different research projects Dr. Kalinin has been involved in. And perhaps of the most important and the most notable work of Dr. Kalinin is in the sphere of researchers on Viktor Shklovsky, a Soviet writer and literature theorist. And all of these works are of a very high quality and interest. But not this makes Dr. Kalinin particularly relevant for our program, as I see. Dr. Kalinin specializes also in a broader range of topics than narrowly defined literature studies. And his work also encompasses intellectual and cultural history and historical politics, particularly research on the Russian Revolution or the proletariat in the Soviet Russia, but also political rhetoric. And finally, what motivated me actually to invite Dr. Kalinin is his research, which I would describe as a triangulation of public culture, involving, first of all, resources such as electricity, but also natural resources, fossils, politics, and ideology. And the topic of his today's talk is political factions or fractions of fossils. And in my understanding, this aligns well with our overall fellowship's theme, focusing on economics and social dynamics in the world, and specifically in Southern Europe or Southeast Europe. And I believe that this lecture and discussion then will be especially valuable for those working on contemporary cultural studies, particularly on the social significance of extractive economies and issues related to economy and security in the Balkans. So I won't take up any more time because, unfortunately, due to the transport strike in Berlin, Dr. Kalinin's time is limited. So I'm pleased to give the floor to our dear guest.
Thank you, Arseniy, for your detailed and kind introduction. And thank you all for coming, for having me here or there in our virtual space. And maybe I need to to apologize because my topic may seem quite weird or bizarre or exotic a bit, but I will try to explain my attitude, my approach to natural resources in general, and oil first of all. And I will focus on on Soviet and post-Soviet situation. So I will not touch the original specificity. I mean Balkan or Southeast Europe region, but I think that my optics can be shared or expand besides the borders of Soviet, post-Soviet Russian space. Yeah, there is an advanced research tradition that has developed within the frames of social sciences. I mean, this tradition describes the strong correlations that arise between the orientation of the national economy towards the extraction of natural resources and its socio-political effects. Yeah, authoritarian rule, low investments in human capital, militarization of foreign policy, technological backwardness, and so on and so forth. But my research offers an approach, I would say, more flexible and more sensitive to different contexts. This approach tries to show how different ideological and social cultural frameworks can construct different meanings attributed to oil or some other fuel fossils, some other natural resources. This can be compared to the process basic for the oil industry itself, the process of cracking or high temperature refining, in which oil is split into different fractions needed to produce motor fuels, lubricating oils, and raw materials for chemical industry. Similarly, in the process of cultural refining of oil, there is social, ideological, political, economic, or trade political factions are extracted from it, different from each other by different rhetorical topics, symbolic load, temporal horizon, and ideological perspectives. So I introduce this concept of fraction, of oil, which allows us to combine two sets of meanings. Two sets of meanings referring to both, to the chemical structure and physical properties of various products of material processing of oil, fractions of oil, on the one hand, and on the other, the various social, ideological, political, and even metaphysical meanings, factions, like political factions, party factions, of oil that are attributed to oil in the process of its discursive processing, in the consciousness or unconsciousness imagination of people, oil workers and engineers, geologists, oil industry leaders, managers and oligarchs, resident of oil producing regions, ordinary citizens, writers, artists, film directors, and politicians, and states and peoples in general. The concept of fraction in this particular modification, which plays with two different meanings, allows to describe the history of diachronic transformation and synchronic tension within the what I would noun petro-imagination, oil imagination or petro-imagination, characteristic of Soviet and post-Soviet Russian societies. This fraction can be described as a form of both rhetorical and cognitive categorization of the object, as a way of conceptual framing of the field, which is at some point determines the ways and mechanisms of interaction with it. So just the most general maybe description of what is meant framing. Framing is a process whereby communicators consciously or unconsciously act to construct a point of view that encourages the facts of a given situation to be interpreted by others in a particular manner. In other words, I'm interested not just in the history of symbolic representation of Soviet and post-Soviet / Russian oil, but we can also talk about the typology of various models or modes of social communication and interaction with it, about various optics of its perception and utilizing. So what I call the fraction of oil is a way of is a way of framing natural and social reality with oil at its center, endowed oil with a particular meaning that is not identical to its immediate physical properties. This categorizing optics, which determines the subject's views of reality and allows to perceive this view as an objective, self-evident, axiomatic given, and it can be compared to the concept of common sense, which is gaining social authority as we can witness, and has become, for example, one of the arguments of Trump's political program, and one of his political energy resource is also oil. Yes, let us just recall his drill baby drill slogan. So common sense in my case turns out to be a form of aggregation of certain value attitudes that underlie the perception of an object, often eluding its consciousness. So the agent in its turn perceives the object in a certain way and acts with it based on this perception. Thus, the description of petro-imagination, objectified in various media forms, also turned out to be a description of various modes and horizons of motivation in making certain technological, political, economic decisions, in committing certain social acts. In the course of my analysis, I can present the relation between oil and Soviet or Russian society, the history of these relations and the current state of affairs. and presented as a clash of various conceptual optics or various social discursive frames or different common senses or political fractions of oil. Another important conceptual horizon of my research is Sheila Jasonov notion of social technical imaginary, which arises at the intersection of socially significant values, scientific ideas, and technological solutions. Expectations of a better future or apocalyptic predictions, theoretical models of fundamental knowledge, and working technological inventions are included in the process of co-production. This is her notion, her term, co-production of technical knowledge and political frames. Based on these optics, technologies can be described not only as derivatives of the universal parameters of rationality and efficiency, but also as a social cultural artifacts. Moreover, my hypothesis is that distinct traces of social cultural construction can be found not only in some technological means, but also in such physical objects as natural energy resources and ways of its utilization. In this regard, another fundamentally important research perspective arises. Perspective associated with the concept of petroculture and or petromodernity, concepts developed in the works of Imre Zeman and Stephanie Leminaja. In this case, oil and its dominant position in the economy and technology of energy extractions fits into a wide horizon of urbanization processes and a new way of life, changes in the level of mobility and temporal regimes, the emergence of new cultural dominance, and a specific language of description that is developing around oil. Oil turns out to be the structural core, or more precisely, the fluid substance of the economy itself, based on the free circulation of financial flows, commodities, and services. A community of leftist writers, intellectuals, artists, and activists from San Francisco, so-called Retort group, links capitalism and oil in the following chain of arguments. I quote their thesis: if goods are the economical cellular form of capitalism, then oil is a perfect example of that cellular form. So oil is is a metaphorical core, metaphorical frame for contemporary capitalist system in general. The above approaches are certainly taken into account in my research project. However, the empirical material of Soviet and post-Soviet oil history allows me to substantially correct these analytical optics. The question is whether it is possible to discover in the history of oil production some other local frame. Local, but however, at one time, this local frame claimed to be no less universal as capitalist one, yeah? And within this frame, oil turned to society in some of its properties other than those which are translated in the pure language of the struggle for money and the endless expansion of consumption opportunities. it seems clear that the fundamental differences between communism and capitalism, socialist and liberal ideologies, planned and market economies, the Soviet system and Soviet political system, I mean, and bourgeois democracy, as well as differences between imperial and colonial, imperial and national perspectives, could not fail to affect the meanings given to natural resources, and oil in particular, as they were moving into the network of corresponding social, political, and ideological transactions. So just a couple of examples about with advertising oil in American Western culture, where oil is about what? Is about consumption. Yeah. And some example from Soviet posters where oil is intervened not in the process of consumption, but in the process of production. Yeah. So oil is an object which includes in the field or world of labor, not in the world of consumption or goods. Yeah. But this is just the the most general visual or imaginary horizon which splits the oil images between these two frames. If the material basis of oil production and technological processing is relatively general in nature, then the specifics of its cultural processing are much more diverse, so that its products may differ from each other to the point of being completely opposite. Yes, like in this case, for example. Based on this analytical optics, the history of Soviet and post-Soviet oil demonstrates the presence of several ideological and political fractions or symbolic political economies that have succeeded each other and coexisted with each other over 21st centuries. Preliminary, on the basis of already conducted research mapping, I differ several fractions which I distinguish from each other. The political formulas of their symbolic economy arouse around one or another ideological core. They organize the space relation between center and periphery, as well as temporal relation between past, present, and future in different ways, and involve the resources, oil, or just cultural resources of various cultural tradition. So those fraction I will focus on. This is a socialist fraction, which is organized around the political program of forced modernization, permitted with the pathos of communist visionarism, and articulated in the language of socialist realism. The second fraction is the anti-colonial fraction, which is emphasis the importance of oil in overcoming the so-called cultural backwardness of the previously colonized people in Transcaucasia, in Central Asia, Siberia, who gained the opportunity for socialist development along with the revolution and the discovery of oil in the territory of their residence. The dispositive of this fraction used elements of local cultural traditions that passed through the filters of Soviet national policy. Next one is national patriotic fraction, and it's like a version of the first fraction, imperial fraction, which is close to national patriotic, which considers oil as an additional sign of the advantage of the Russian people, allowing them to realize their national and geopolitical potential. The language of articulation of this fraction paradoxically synthesized traditionalist and modernist cultural tradition. Next one is the post-colonial fraction, considering the development of oil fields carried out by the central government from the point of view of the native peoples of those territory they are located. Its language combines local folklore as well as elements of modern meta-languages of post-colonial studies and environmental sensibility. And the last one is the neoliberal fraction, which comprehends oil as a fluid substance capable of endless metamorphosis, comparable to the intangibility of financial flows of the modern global world. The language of this fraction plays with elements of postmodern poetics, post-structural theory, and popular culture. I will focus during next 10 or 15 minutes on the dialectic of Soviet oil. Unlike post-Soviet oil, which filled the rent streams that connected the subsoil and the elites, the prehistoric past, geological past, and the demodernizing present, Soviet oil provided the energy flows necessary for socialist transformations. In the first case, oil turns out to be the synonymous with rent collected from the past. What is the past? Resources accumulated during geological evolution. In the second, in the case of Soviet oil, it acts as a productive force that transforms the prehistoric past into the historical present of socialism under construction. What now, in current situation, functions as a commodity, objectified market substance, within the framework of socialist political economy, functioned as a productive force with its own historical subjectivity. At least this is the symbolic conceptualization of oil that we can find in Soviet culture. Thus, natural resources were no longer understood in terms of exploitation, but in terms of liberation and transformation, or even transfiguration and resurrection of the past crystallized in resources, and investment of this liberated energy in building the future. In this, it is in this light unsurprising that in 1927 was found a state commission for the registry of valuable extractable resources. This commission was founded in order to establish a unified system for the evaluation of resources in connection with planning for the industrial modernization. In this manner, the base, so geological depth and superstructure, in that case, the planning of industrialization, were rendered links in a single dialectical chain of transformations, the significance of which was that the dynamic potential of natural resources, productive forces, incorporated into socialist relations of production, and were to change not only the character of okay, social relationship with nature, but the character of social interrelationships themselves. By 1932, energy resources had already been technically identified as the key problem of industrialization and five-year planning. And oil became one of the most important natural resources. In 1930, in Moscow was founded the Institute of Oil. In 1932, the head of this institute, Professor Ivan Gubkin, published his general work, The Doctrine of Oil, Учение о нефти. It sounds a bit alchemical, I would say, учение, yes, like doctrine, which poses not only questions of a geological character relating to prospecting and the development of oil deposits, but which also describes in detail the mechanisms of the generation of oil. The genealogy of oil inscribes it into general processes of evolution, of transition from the organic, prehistoric plants and microorganisms to the inorganic chemical compounds or oil, which thereafter must be transformed into the goods of social life. In this manner, oil is presented not only as one of the most important energy reserves, but also as a symbolic shifter, which dialectically combines the processes of prehistoric natural development and the movements of human history. I quote Gubkin, but you may see this quotation on the screen. In this book, I have made the attempt to approach the processes of the origin of oil and of the formation of oil deposits from a dialectical point of view, driven by the thought that these processes present one of the streams of the great unified dialectical process of the development of our Earth. So thus oil begins to speak the language of historical and dialectical materialism, making a leap from the world of geology to the world of history, from the natural to the social. In the same year, the Soviet writer Marietta Shaginian, Soviet Armenian writer, completed the novel Hydrocentral, written after several years spent building a hydroelectric power station in Armenia. In one of the dialogues of this novel, we encounter the same symbolic move that dialectically connects geology and history, subsoil and society, base and superstructure. I quote this fragment. This is a monologue of one of the character in this novel. This character addressed to the geologist of old pre-revolutionary school. You dig up layers, find fossils, mess with them, define, classify. But what about living layers inhabited by living people? It is not possible to think of them together with the earth, to perceive them as a whole. I think it's time for geology, like history does it, to turn its face forward. Otherwise, we won't be able to plan. This means that geology will have to sociologize in some way to include a small addition to the concept of land. Land is as a settlement inhabited by a living society, and not by fossils. In our words, the subsoil is a materialization of the spatial metaphor underlining the Marxist concept of basis. The subsoil geological depth must be described and taken into account as the productive forces of the socialist planning economy, which allows this depth to reveal their entire energy potential. Within the narrow optics of bourgeois production, the relations, and private property, this is impossible to do precisely because the private capitalist optics was unable to see the boils of the earth as a total dialectical unity with the society living on the surface of the land. Yeah, maybe the most prominent early Soviet writer Andrei Platonov, who was a member of the commission for the study of the productive forces of the Turkmen Soviet Socialist Republic in the first half of the 1930s, articulated precisely such a view of these matters. The transformation of all that was located on the surface of the land, industry, society, culture, was possible only by means of the liberation of energies concealed in the depth of the earth, so natural resources. In his article, the hot Arctic, this is the metaphor for Turkmenistan, yeah? He wrote, supporting and inspiring in every way the assault of the desert along its surface. So to speak, we nevertheless dare to declare that the key to complete conquest lays in the depth. So nature's dialectical contradiction consists in its concealment. Beneath an impoverished and vacant present desert, there are resources for a blindingly radiant future accumulated from the prehistoric past. The path forward lies in the movement downward. Yet in this instance, the depth will turn out to hold not the past, as conservative thought would have it, but the future. In this, and this future is concentrated in natural resources and primarily in oil. I will follow to quote his essay. The Karakum deserts, this means cisterns of oil, crates of coal, sacks of sulfur, and so on. Nature is contradictory. Beneath the wretched exterior of the deserts, it conceals our future domains, more valuable than if a beech grove were growing there. It seemed to us that the sense can be overcome if we only reach down to strata below. Oil, gas, sulfur, coal, minerals, chemical ores all demanded that we cover the dead space of the Karakum with living industry, raising the labor, culture, well-being, and the soul of Turkmen people to a height surpassing any and all culture of ancient times. This is the end of quote. So the relationship that links the history of Soviet oil to Soviet history in general is far more than simply the relationship of part to whole. The two, oil and Soviet history, are tied together in more complex connections that may be compared rather with the link between a machine and the energy that sets it in motion, that ensures its functioning. Yet it's also capable of destroying it from within. Oil, that from the very beginning of Soviet history assumed the role of one of the most important energy resource for socialist modernization, ultimately came to function among the main factors contributing to economic and social deceleration and stagnation. Further, the crux of the matter is not only and not predominantly a reflection of the shortcomings of Soviet planning or the fundamental inferiority of a planned economy as such. The immediate cause of this negative dialectic, which rotated the link between oil and modernization, but by 180 degrees, was the inclusion of oil in a network of political and ideological relations that rendered it hostage to conceptual dogmas concerning the industrial foundation of the socialist economy, which demanded dominance of the production of means of production over the production of end products or objects of consumption by the population. The discovery of extraordinary rich oil fields in Western Siberia at the turn of the 1950s and 1960s, and the subsequent political decision to fundamentally increase the share of exported oil and gas made it possible during the 1970s to conceal and camouflage the actual and growing imbalance between these two types of production, the production of means of production and some consumer goods. Oil became more than simply an energy resource. Rather, it was transformed into the fluid that made it possible not only for the socialist economy, but also for late Soviet society as a whole to stay afloat. While the economies of the First World were making a qualitative technological leap forward, founded primarily on production of consumer goods and services, invest in fixed assets or in the creation of new technologies, including information technologies, as well as in human capital, the socialist economy continued to focus on parameters of modernization dating to the era of the formation of large-scale heavy industry. Paradoxically, it was precisely oil extracted from the distant depth of the geological time that made it possible artificially to fill the gap between the industrial modernity of the late 19th, early 20th centuries and the high-tech post-industrial form of modernity that took shape at the turn of the 60s and 90s and 60s and 70s. Yeah. Powerful flows of late Soviet oil were used by Soviet leadership as a means for the abundant lubrication of the increasingly discrepant and cumbersome political and economic machine of late socialism. The presence of hydrocarbon reserves generated across the far reaches of geological time made it possible to postpone into the future all structural social economic reforms, compensating the technological backwardness, low-level labor productivity, and commodity shortages at the expense of the wealth accumulated by nature. The transformation of the macroeconomic functionality of oil in the Soviet economy can be described as follows. Until the 60s, Soviet oil produced the energy that fueled the development of the socialist industrial economy, which was forging ahead in consonance with global economic trends. However, from the late 60s and onwards, the situation underwent change with increasing rapidity. Within the framework of these changing coordinates, the structural significance of oil in the Soviet economic system began to change as well. At the level of official economic discourse and the language of political propaganda, oil continued to be an element of the progressive energy discourse of modernization, accelerated growth, and the breakthrough to the communist future. However, at the level of the real economic and managerial practices of real socialism, it gradually lost its role as an energy resource for modernization, turning more and more into conservation lubricant that made it possible for an aging system to continue functioning without recourse to renovation and renewal. During this period, the cultural logic of late capitalism learned to refine the physical materiality of oil into a dynamic abstraction of financial capital, actualizing its physical properties such as fluidity and chemical metamorphism, endow them with magical linkages to wealth and the borderless nature of the globalizing world. At the same time, in the USSR, extraction of socialist oil continued to be associated with heavy industry, standing on a par with the indicators for quantities of coal mined or steel and iron, taking the shape more of a metonymy for labor than a metaphor for capital. The Soviet petrochemical industry experienced difficulties in complex oil refining, both in relation to production of light fractions and generation of artificial materials, requiring imported technologies. In the same way, the cultural logic of late socialism saw in oil primarily its physical, material essence, rather than mobile streams of split molecules and virtual dollars entering into multiple social, technical, and chemical political assemblages and transactions. It was only that portion of Soviet oil that was sold on external capitalist markets that worked to introduce some surrogate forms of post-industrial capitalist modernity into industrial socialist everyday life, allowing Soviet consumers to become acquainted with samples of its commercial outputs. There was approximately the same logic of exchange was between the USSR and Yugoslavia, which supplied consumer goods to the USSR in exchange for oil and gas. So the peak of socialist oil extraction, for example, in 1975, the USSR ranked first in the world in oil production. So the peak of socialist extraction was mirrored in the failure of Soviet economic and social development. Deep fields of oil, heroically stormed by Soviet oilmen, ensured production growth, making it possible to compensate for the consequences of the USSR technological lag behind the leading world economies and low level of production of consumer goods, included foodstuffs, which was enabled to satisfy domestic demand. The mere possibility for such a compensation, export of resources, import of goods and technologies, led to even greater backwardness, requiring ever greater assaults of depth and on even more inaccessible fields, holding ever richer oil reserves, and so on in a spiral. The triumph and tragedy of the oil and gas sector were interconnected not only mechanically as successive links in a chain, in which accelerated development of extraordinary fields in the 1960s and the first half of the 1970s led to the premature depletion of the richest areas and a sharp slowdown in production growth by the mid-1980s. The triumph of the oil and the gas sector turned out to be a dialectical double of the fiasco of the socialist economy, not only the object of its conscious pride, but also its unconscious core, making possible the fulfillment of desires, geopolitical influence, military power, growth in everyday consumption, while hidden from the system itself, the rather unmentionable and obscene, I would say, real source of their implementation, the exchange of domestic natural resources for products produced by modern foreign industry, including modernized agriculture. The Soviet leadership provided its relationship with oil by means of mechanisms strikingly similar to those described by Sigmund Freud in his article Fetishism in 1927, where he designates this phenomenon via the concept of disavowal or Verleugnung. The work of these psychological mechanisms, according to Freud, boils down to the following. I know very well that something is the case, but I perceive the situation and act as though it is not so. Yeah? This is the core mechanism of Verleugnung. In this sense, the oil and gas complex of the Soviet economy may be taken as such not only in the industrial, but also in the psychoanalytic sense. Yeah, oil and gas complex. In other words, this was a conglomeration of interconnected, affectively colored, partially conscious, partly unconscious elements, imperative ideas, notions, fantasies, which determine the general vector of the late Soviet economy's work. Oil became both a conscious external goal towards which the Communist Party oriented the industry in question, and an internal condition of the functioning of the collective psyche of the entire late Soviet economy. However, the party could not officially recognize the structural role of oil, which permitted an ever larger sphere of economic and social relations, subjecting this fact to denial in Freudian sense of Verleugnung, and forcing it into the economic unconscious, within which occurred the imaginary removal of contradictions unsolvable in the framework of actually existing economic practices. The party leadership was well aware that the economic condition of the country was increasingly fundamentally dependent on the volume of oil produced, and demanded from oil workers more and more millions of tons of the substance that could be exchanged for consumer goods and food that social industry and agriculture could not produce. At the same time, the leadership acted on the basis of the conviction that the social economic model that had been created in the USSR was the most progressive and advanced in the world. Soviet society continued to strike out on the path into outer space, denying the fact that their existence was increasingly dependent on the stores of oil hidden deep underground. The ideological grammar of the language spoken by this society was still focused on a bright future, while denying that its everyday life, so the praxis of its social speech, was provided by the reserves derived from the dark past, concentrated in hydrocarbon resources. The greater the dependence of the socialist economy of oil produced in the Soviet geological depth, the more effort was required to deny this fact at the level of the officially articulated economic and political agenda. the more effort expended on repression of this recognition, the greater the volume of repressed energy accumulating in the unconscious of late Soviet culture and breaking through its individual instances as symptoms of this repression. The tension that arose between the exceptional importance attached to oil production in the USSR and the actual role that it played in the late Soviet period spilled into the space of culture along with flows of oil. In consequence of the enormous pressure that drove ideas and conceptions regarding oil out of the official political and economic discourse and into the social imaginary, the products of their cultural refining exploded the artistic and ideological norms of official Soviet culture. Now I should skip the analysis of the amazing film by Andron Konchalovsky, Siberia. Maybe some of you saw this film, but I highly and strongly recommend you to see this epic film. This film is about the oil workers and search for oil during the 20th century in Western Siberia. But the final idea, final imaginary of oil, which, as you can see in this shot, in very close connection with the cemetery. So the substance of oil is compared to the substance of dead bodies of our ancestors. So there is some metaphorical correlation between the depth of natural resource and depth of cultural tradition, cemetery with our ancestor, and the oil which is flow from the depth. Also, the dead ancestors are resurrected in the final scene of this film. So Soviet director Konchalovsky compared the fountains of oil with the idea of resurrection of dead bodies of Russian ancestors. So this is the visualization of the most radical utopia of Russian cosmism. I mean, Nikolai Fedorov and his idea of general resurrection of all dead generations of ancestors. So this is the late Soviet culture, which officially visualized the mystical ideas of Russian cosmism in Soviet screen. And from my point of view, this is the symptom of the this unconscious tension and some fetishization, mythologization of oil in late Soviet culture. Yeah, and quite close to the final stage of my talk today, and I will go to the post-Soviet period. So the cultural phenomenology of post-Soviet oil rests on and above unconscious fixation on the past, which resonates with the consciously pursued conservative policy and a rent-oriented economy, whose goal is to monopolize access to natural resources within the framework of large companies operating in the state corporate sector. In addition to its economic and social dimensions, the logic of rent relies on a historical and cultural imagination that sees in the past the source of not only their material well-being, but also their national identity. During the first 2 decades of the 21st century, the oil and gas complex not only figures prominently among the limited sources of national income in Russia, but also constitutes an important component of the national idea. In a somewhat simplified form, this is to say that recognition of the possession of the wealth of natural resources serves as a proof of national superiority, undergirding pretensions to political might. Just as in the recent Soviet past, natural resources form the foundation for geopolitical aspirations to create an energy superpower. But in distinction from the early era of the 1960s, 1980s, Russia no longer offers the world any sort of universal idea, and rather invests all strategies, hopes, and its entire political and ideological potential in oil, gas, and infrastructure for their transportation. And in the contemporary Russian state discourse of the nation tries to build itself through an appeal to the past, through a conservative turn to tradition, oil, which already plays a fundamental role in the economy, becomes not only a material, but also a symbolic resource that must be developed. In Victor Pelevin's novel, The Sacred Book of the Werewolf, it is 2004, there is a key thing that allegorically materializes this connection between oil, the past, and the nature of the Russian economy. In this scene, the FSB General of Federal Security Service, who possesses the mystical abilities of the werewolf, turns to a kind of totem animal, the spirit of Russian land, on which the state's well-being depends. And he addresses to this totem animal, brindle cow. Brindle cow, do you hear, brindle cow? I know I must have lost all sense of shame to ask you for oil yet again. I do not ask for it. We do not deserve it. I know who you are. You are, so the same idea as in Konchalovsky epic film of the late 70s. I know who you are. You, brindle cow, the mystical animal who possesses the oil. You are everyone who lived here before us. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and before that, and before that. You are the soul of all those who died believing in the happiness that would come in the future. And now, see, it has come. So these dead ancestors, parents, grandparents, and so on and so forth, this is the substance of oil, yeah? Like, okay, dead dinosaurs from the prehistoric time. So hidden in the depth of the earth, oil is characterized by mystery and concealment. This concealment for its past is an important factor in its elevated cultural value. The treasures of tradition lie not on the surface, but they must be sought out and claimed as elements of the national inheritance. The political economic significance of the conservative ideological turn derives from the transformation of the past into a source or resource for the extraction of symbolic capital. In this regard, the Russian political elite's interest in the historical past is based on the same mechanisms that found its interest in oil and gas. These are conceptions of riches buried somewhere in the depth, which must be extracted and utilized and monopolized, yeah, before that. In the case of the contemporary Russian politics of memory and cultural politics of normative national identity, we are dealing with the past deprived of own historical dimension, which is transformed into a usable national legacy. In the case of oil, this is the prehistoric past, organic life that has decayed into hydrocarbons over hundreds of millions of years, condensing within itself energetic potential. In this manner, a resource-dependent economy oriented on the extraction of oil is revealed as an economy aimed at the recovery of the distant past. And the final episode of post-Soviet oil. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, we can see a dramatic change in the direction, of Russian oil and gas flows. China and India are becoming the main consumer of Russian energy resources. In turn, Russia becomes totally dependent both on these energy supplies and on the goods and technologies that China, first of all, sells to it. Russia's political dependence on China is becoming a fact recognized even by the Russian leadership. A symptomatic shift also occurs in the symbolic connection that interests us, connection between natural energy resources and cultural values, which official Russian discourse places at the basis of national identity. Recently, Putin actually admitted his vassal dependence on China when he cited as an ideal example of the policy of Russian Prince Alexander Nevsky in the 13th century. This is the quotation on the screen. Prince Alexander Nevsky traveled to the Golden Horde, bowed to the bowed to the horde Hans, received a label to reign, among other things, and primarily in order to effectively resist Western invasion. Why? Because the horde behaved arrogantly, cruelly, but they didn't affect the main thing. What? Our language, traditions, culture, which the Western conquerors claimed. So at the same time, the Russian Orthodox Church already reveres Prince Alexander as a saint precisely for this choice between the Golden Horde, so Eastern orientation of Russian policy and culture, and the Western choice. In our perspective, the following conclusion can be drawn from this. Previously, since late Soviet times, since 1970s, and especially in the last 2 decades, Soviet and Russian oil was exchanged not only for Western capital, Western goods and technologies, but also for Western cultural and political values. Together with the dollars and euros received for oil, liberal democracy and LGBT monstrous values penetrated into Russia. Now a new era of exchange with the East is beginning, when oil is exchanged exclusively for Chinese capital and goods that do not carry values that threaten the purity of the Russian national tradition. So pure Chinese yuan received for crude Russian oil does not threaten to pure Russian spirit, like on this photo. Thank you for your attention. I'm done.
Thank you, Ilya. That was very sophisticated and very dense and reach. It would be really great to read all these as a probably not even a paper by book. Yeah, we will see what's gonna happen now with Russia. Maybe it's going back to the West again, or at least back to the United States again. So
we'll see.
yeah. But yeah, so I think now this is the time for the sort of replics to this presentation, maybe benign criticism, maybe questions. Yeah, so please, do you have something? Do you have any commentaries or questions to Ilya?
Come on, Arseniy, you need to break the ice. And
I
then
need to break.
it's very dense indeed, but I do think that there are some overlappings with topics of some of our fellows as well. And then this comparative approach and very much clever way of going into fraction or faction you provided and discovered some elements that are precious. For example, I didn't know for the work of Sheila Yasanov, and now I'm intrigued to read more on this over or crossing between cultural and scientific realms. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe one comment from my side about the relation between Soviet and post-Soviet oil and Yugoslavia and
The Soviet bloc.
Soviet bloc, yeah, and contemporary national state, former Yugoslavian Republic. So I just started to look on this direction, and I just found a real interesting situation in this case. So the energy politics of Broz Tito was an attempt to diversify the oil and gas direction from, yes, as well as you know, from Eastern Bloc and USSR and from the West. So there are different pipelines from Italy, from Greece, and from from Eastern Bloc, from the US,
Bulgaria,
from
yeah,
Bulgaria, but
Bulgaria,
from
Romania,
Bulgaria and
through this.
Hungary was connected to the pipeline Druzhba, yeah, friendship. So he tried to get both, Soviet and capitalist oil, and to create some independency from both of these geopolitical
If I
horizons.
may, Ilya, now because we are engaged in exchange, so there is a ghost behind, because the very important corpus of study is on non-alignment movement in Yugoslavia. As such, was one of the pillars of this non-alignment movement. And if we read, applying your way methodologies in reading these aspects of non-alignment, of being in between, we can go and really recognize what was it that was very close with Africa and African countries, what was it that was very close with India, and that can provide us another layer of understanding what you explored in the Soviet context. So
Yes,
yes,
yes, yes.
and we are doing it. So we are
Yeah.
having scholars in the center that are working on non-alignment movement in different aspects, economic, but also geopolitical, and in the readings of neo-colonial practices as non-alignment in that respect. So there will be much to say, but I will not keep others maybe to reacting or yes, Peter, please go on.
Yeah, thank you very much for your very interesting talk. I just had one kind of question, which is that maybe from your perspective, what you make of this connection between well, what was then the Soviet Union and Cuba, because this also was one based upon oil too, wasn't it? In the sense that the Cuban Revolution, okay, not initially, but let's say slightly later on, became in a way also kind of supported by, well, effectively the transfer of free oil in order to keep it kind of. So I just wondered, I mean, in terms of the, let's say the framework, this is a kind of let's say this is a type of oil internationalism, isn't it? It's not an oil nationalism per se, is it?
Yeah, yeah. I would say that I can okay, describe this oil flow, yeah, from USSR to Cuba in the frame of what I called anti-colonial, okay, or international fraction of oil, because officially from the point of view from the Soviet perspective, this part of oil that went to okay, to the third world, to some socialist countries. This was the way of okay, Soviet geopolitical influence from the first side, and it is also the export of revolution. Yes, so this is the oil which features which some physical properties also obtain some political meanings. Yeah, so the very idea of revolution or some okay geopolitical choices also was included in this material substance of Soviet oil, which transported by ships from Odessa to Havana. Yeah, so. This is a okay revolutionary oil or oil for okay anti-colonial upheaval of Cuba people against American imperialism. Yeah, for example. So it's also political, very loaded politically oil substance, which transported via these tankers, ship tankers from USSR to Cuba or to some African countries, which also try to provide their anti-colonial policy in the late 60s, 70s, and so on and so forth. Yeah, maybe I'm sorry, I just added because now I'm very fascinated with this new field of probably future research. I mean USSR and Yugoslavia and the process of okay disintegration of Yugoslavia, because the energy system of Yugoslavia was not centralized. Yeah, because of different diverse pipelines which entered into Yugoslavia from different sides, from the east, from the south, from the west. And I think that it's also this situation, I mean, had its own role in the process of, of disintegration, or from another perspective, for obtain national independence of different former Yugoslavian republic, because they were a bit independent in the context of energy resources. Yeah. And for example, Croatia and Slovenia got its oil from the from Italy and in Greece. So this was Western capitalist oil. And Croatia and Slovenia, it's very schematic and simplified ways of description, but nevertheless. So maybe these political features of this oil from Italy and Greece sometimes affected on political choice of Croatia and Slovenia in compared to Serbia, for example, which got and still get its oil from the east, from Russia right now. So maybe even these political properties of oil from different sides also affected on political choices of different former Yugoslavian republics. So I'm going to to immerse in this field and in this region in my further research, I hope.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yeah, do you still have some time?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I checked the schedule, so I
wonderful. So maybe I'd like also to ask, well, first of all, again, there are like many fractions of your talk that could be discussed separately. And it's like really hard to choose. But maybe.
And this is an open list, so this is not just the closed typology of fractions. So.
Yeah, that's also true. But yeah, I think I'm going to ask this one. So I'm just thinking about how could be this perspective that you have provided be used in some other cases, or maybe in some other probably in some other cases, or maybe on some more general level. So do I understand you correctly that we may say that political leadership, and maybe especially in the countries rich in some resources, some natural resources, may start to abuse this logic of extractivism, or logic of like this very progressist but also very oligarchic understanding of the resources, and be converted from just this political field to the sort of social engineering that will lead to this political leadership to put their hand not only to the oil or some other fossils or some other natural resources, but also to the population itself, and to make some extractions and changes in the population in the way they're doing this with the oil, or with some other, let's say, rare earth elements like lithium. That's that has a lot of relevance in the case of Serbia, for instance. So there is again, that would be a Russian example, but there is a phrase in Russia that population or people is a new oil. So in this sense, it also must be somehow extracted and developed and then used in order trying to reach some sort of prosperity and wealth. So would be this understanding of government, of political leadership as oligarchs and engineers, correct or not?
Oh, Arseniy, I'm not certain that I understood your comments clear. Maybe you try to
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
A bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that there is quite understandable to use natural resources
Yeah.
in all.
Yeah. Okay.
And that would be the purpose for the political leadership, of course, who controls this, but maybe primarily by the entrepreneurs who work with these resources, engineers who work like directly with the extraction of those resources. I'm just thinking whether this metaphor of extraction could be used in order to analyze the political leadership that is doing the same thing, but not with the oil or with lithium, but with the population, extracting something and and gaining from this.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's we may use these optics not only in the context of states and population, or planned economy and so on, but also apply this logic for the activities of private entrepreneurs. Yeah. What is the maybe the main goal or the main statement of my theory? I would say that this is an attempt to make this relation between resource orientation and some social, political, economical, cultural effects, yes, which based on these resource-oriented economical practices, more variable, more fluid. So I try to overcome this economical determinism between orientation on natural resource and all this extract these consequences of this orientation. So we may compare my attempt with the maybe, for example, Althusserian concept of over determination. So this is not strict material determination between a certain type of economy and a certain type of political regime, social order, and so on and so forth, but some mutual correlation, which orientation to oil or some other natural resources could produce different political, social, cultural effects. For example, as I tried to show, for example, Soviet oil could produce, could works as a mean of modernization and as a mean of demodernization. It could be the mean of in anti-colonial movement and imperial ambition. Yeah, so there is so oil obtains different meanings, political, cultural, social meanings in different social, cultural, political, economical contexts. So this is the main statement. So I try to be, in this case, more sensitive than social sciences, than economical sciences, which produce this notion, for example, as oil curse. So there is oil curse, and we know how it works. But I say that it works differently in different contexts.
Yeah, and maybe not necessarily.
So we may try, we may pose different diagnoses to this relation, not only a curse, but some other diagnosis.
Yeah, of course, it's very seducing to use this, not like to say that this is curse, but rather this is just a straight way to prosperity, global welfare, and so on. So I don't know. Our meeting should last for 1 hour and a half, and it's 1:30 p.m. So maybe we should just stop here. And I want to thank again everyone who has been here, and specifically Dr. Kalinin for his time, for his dedication. Thank you for sharing this with us, and that was really great to have you here.
Thank you for invitation, and
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Yeah, you too.